I'm guessing that Are You Afraid of the Dark finally killed me off. Either that, or it's the embarrassment of having called it Alone in the Dark a whole bunch of times. Either way, it's spooky season, and that means that the corpse of both me and my YouTube channel are being revived so that we can go back on our bullshit again. That's right. It's time to look at more Goosebumps game books.
Back during Halloween 2019, I decided to do what I do best and look at a bunch of game books, in this instance based on the Goosebumps series by R.L. Stine. If you're not familiar, these are like choose your own adventure books. Instead of reading front to back like you normally would, you choose how the adventure goes by turning to different pages to make specific choices. In fact, they follow the exact same format of these books too, lacking the stats and inventory that you'd typically find in books like Fighting Fantasy or the Sonic game books I've covered. This makes them really easy to get into, requiring nothing as complex as a set of dice or a pencil.
This time, I decided to take a look at the next 5 books in the series, beginning with Book 6, Beware the Purple Peanut Butter. Does that sound...
It's the beginning of summer. An entire 2 months of free time stretches out before you. But unfortunately, your parents have decided to go on holiday without you, so you'll be staying with your annoying aunt, uncle, and a pair of annoying cousins, Barney the Bully and Drippy Dora.
I love it when characters are conveniently labelled right in the opening.
With an incredibly annoying summer ahead of you, you decide to immediately ignore your uncle's instructions to avoid the basement, and end up consuming strange substances that you find there. Because of course you do. I mean, what else are you going to do with strange substances that you find?
If you're familiar with any of the other books that I covered before, you'll probably already be expecting the obvious fake-out choice that you get at the start of the book. Sure, you technically can listen to what your aunt and uncle have to say to you, but if you do that, this horror story has no reason to punish you, so you're basically forced to go through with it.
Either way, mysterious substance thus consumed, you end up either shrinking or growing, depending on what you ate, and then you have to deal with the consequences, whatever they might be. There are plenty of different paths to take, though a lot of the really fun stuff happens on the shrinking path. You can visit a mad scientist, crawl through the junkyard, or even get so small that you infinitely regress into nothing at all. There are also a few lazy endings on display here though. During one of the shrinking endings, the author completely forgets about the scale of the different objects in relation to each other, meaning that the ending makes 0 sense.
Of course, the proof of a horror story like this one is in the endings, and luckily there are at least a few interesting ones, but it never really manages to get to that harsh and gory place that the darkest parts of the first half of the series got.
It's mostly simple stuff that gets you. Being dropped by a janitor while tiny, or squashed by something is the most common, but there were a few fun ones too. I especially enjoyed the ending where you gain magnetic powers, then go on to get crushed to death by walking past a recycling centre.
All in all, Beware the Purple Peanut Butter is a somewhat lacklustre start to the second half of the series. It's sort of cute how it's clearly based on Alice in Wonderland, and that might be a good way of getting some Goosebumps kids to read other stories, what with a number of references to that in the book. But beyond that, it just kind of feels a bit lacklustre. For Goosebumps out of 10? Geesebumps?
Book 7, Under the Magician's Spell, sees you trying to meet your friend at the local mall, but unfortunately, you're forced to bring your bratty younger sister along with you. Of course, your younger sister is comically annoying, and manages to steal a magic book of spells from the creepy magic shop owner. Of course, again, that guy turns out to be a real wizard, so you have to try and return his magic book to him and save you, your friend, and your sister.
This book is very much on par with the goings-on in Beware the Purple Peanut Butter. A lot of the endings tend towards the uncreative side of things, and honestly they mostly feel like straight-up game overs, rather than being interesting horror scenarios that you want to actually try to achieve something. There is a moment where you use a deck of cards though, and I'm pretty sure that's a first for the series so far.
There are a few creative paths here, but they don't feel all that well linked thematically speaking. It's just a bunch of sort of random horror set pieces, some of which tangentially connect to magic or stage shows. Like, sure, you can get sawn in half and put that together wrong, but you can also get stuck polishing rhinestones for eternity, or drugged for some evil granny's stew. There's just not much cohesion here. In the best possible ending, you and your companions are saved, and even manage to take some revenge against the bullies who show up halfway through some branches of the storyline. There's also an ending that isn't really an ending, where you just start playing baseball with 3 skeletons and nothing gets resolved.
What was going on with Stein during the writing of this one? It's like he just discovered mescaline. 4 out of 10.
Book 8, The Curse of the Creeping Coffin, is another in a streak of slightly mediocre entries in the series, though not quite on par with the quality of the last 2 books. This time you're staying with your grandmother over the summer, when the graveyard near her garden starts to go crazy with the headstones swapping all over the place. As you're trying to figure out why, a bunch of ghosts jump out of their graves and take over your grandmother's place, leaving you to try and solve everything on your own. While Curse of the Creeping Coffin isn't on par with the best of what the series has to offer, it's certainly a step up over the previous 2 books we talked about today. It has a very, very interesting split path dynamic, and it at the very least is all about ghosts in different formats, rather than just being stuff happening to people in specific scenarios. Early on, you basically have to choose between facing your problems head on, or screaming and whining until your parents cancel their whole vacation so they can come and take you home. It very much feels like the sort of place where you're going to get one of those famous R.L. Stine full stop choices again, but this time there's actually a continuation of the ghost storyline, where you and your best friend have to deal with a ghost following you around. If you stay at your grandmother's place, then the story is about breaking a specific curse that will end with you and your grandmother being killed. It's actually an interesting split, but it's sort of a shame that in one of these 2 paths there is no Curse of the Creeping Coffin, so the title doesn't really make any sense.
This is also the first time I remember localization becoming an issue. One of these checks requires you to live in 2 very specific states in the US, which is bad enough if you live in one of the other 48 states, let alone the rest of the entire world.
Not that my gripe has any merit at all, because that check is completely meaningless. No matter which of these options you end up having to go with, you'll be on the same page in the end. It's really weird reading through some of these game books. On one hand, it's pretty impressive that R.L. Stine wrote this himself, assuming that these weren't ghost written, but on the other hand, it almost feels like there was a lack of coherent design. Many of the stories so far have felt like they were plucking random Goosebumps moments out of thin air and sort of slotting them in wherever they were needed.
While it's definitely a step up over the previous 2 entries in the series and over the Werewolf Woods from the last video, Curse of the Creeping Coffin thrives by being a strongly themed ghost story, and not by being that great of a game book experience. 5 out of 10.
I haven't spent that long talking about the previous 3 books in this series, and the main reason behind that is that I just don't feel like any of them have anything that special to offer for us to talk about. That is not the case with Knight in Screaming Armour. Not only is this a heavily themed and very well designed game book, but it's also a British-centred game book written by an American author that doesn't make me want to vomit my skin inside out that much. I also think it's cool that they spell armour with a U on the cover, even though they haven't really localised anything else in the rest of the series. Give Yourself Goosebumps 9, The Knight in Screaming Armour, is a strongly themed game book that really feels like the writer knew what they were doing. Either this is a different ghostwriter, or Stine picked up a bloody copy of The Cave of Time for the first time in his life. Either way, this is certainly the first time where the mechanics of choosing your own adventure are handled in a smooth way, with minimal, obvious loops, and a good amount of telegraphs and decent endings. Storyline sees you visited by your 2 English cousins, and because your Uncle William
Bloody who?
works in some British museum, they're arriving with 2 crates filled with artefacts for a talk that your uncle is giving the next day. As you're helping to pack the crates into your garage, you accidentally activate a curse that sees your family hunted by a living suit of evil armour. Of course, that night, as you lie in your bed, the screaming armour starts screaming, and you and your cousins have to go on an adventure together to try and stop the curse from killing everyone left in your family. If you're a long-time watcher of the show, or a long-time reader of the game books, then you could probably guess that this game also starts with another false choice, and it sort of does. When you first hear the screaming from the garage, you can just try to ignore it, but it becomes quite apparent pretty quickly that you can't really ignore the screaming for long. Instead, you get the choice between the evil chest and the good chest. If you pick the good chest, you end up in the museum that your uncle is speaking at in the morning, but if you pick up the evil chest, you get sent to medieval England. Or at least I think it's medieval?
I can almost hear the incredibly badly done fake British accents that would have existed in the hypothetical TV show of this book. They are not good.
No matter which route you take, you and your cousins will have to fend off various enemies, ranging from mud people in the museum to evil wizards and monsters in England. There are even a few insanely huge loops that take you from nearly the end of one path right back to the start of the book again. It's basically just a semi-legitimised game over and start again, but it's still a more interesting piece of gamebook design than we usually see in this series. On that note, we also have a really weird fake ending towards the start of the book. I'm not even sure if this thing counts as an actual game over, unless you just close the book as soon as you see the words "the end."
At this point in the series, we've seen a couple of illustrations start to sneak their way in. A notable example is in Curse of the Creeping Coffins, where we get to see the layout of the graveyard because it's relevant to the curse. Here in the Knight in Screaming Armour, there's even a maze that you have to do, and the outcome of the page that you go to is based on how well you do that maze. I mean, it kind of feels like we're just going to cheat through it, but sure, thanks for having faith, I guess. While these illustrations are nice, it kind of also highlights that it would have been nicer to get a few actual illustrations of things that are happening throughout the pages. I mean, there is a lot of blank space in some of these that could have easily been filled with a bit of illustration. But then again, maybe I'm asking too much. After all, none of these illustrators appear to have been credited anywhere on these books, unless they were done by R.L. Bloody Stein as well.
Jokes aside, most of the artwork on the front of these books is done by Mark Nagata, except for the first book, which was done by the Goosebumps original cover illustrator, Tim Jacobus. Either one of these artists would have been a good choice for some in-book illustrations too. Then again, neither of these guys were properly credited, so perhaps asking them to do even more uncredited work just so I can get my kicks is probably a bit of a Richard relocation. It does sort of make you wonder whether these artists were given any direction on what to draw, outside of the name of the books that they were doing. Obviously, with Escape from the Carnival of Horrors, the answer was probably a yes, because otherwise Jacobus would have had to have been psychic. The rest of the books barely match up with their artwork. Like, the Magician book does feature a scene with the saw in half trick, but not like that, and some of these others just never happen at all. In the Purple Peanut Butter, you never get consumed by a giant sandwich filled with purple peanut butter. It's called that because you eat something that is like purple peanut butter.
I've ended up on a tangent here. I just think it's kind of crappy to not relatively visibly obviously credit your artists for some of these cover pieces. I mean, they're really good, and I had to go to Google to discover Nagata and Jacobus's names because they are nowhere on these books, at least nowhere I've been able to find. Griping about proper credit aside though, The Knight in Screaming Armour is one of the best books in the series so far, and is easily my second favourite after Escape from the Carnival of Horrors. 8 out of 10.
The final book that I'll be looking at today is Diary of a Mad Mummy, and it manages to keep the momentum that was gained in The Knight in Screaming Armour. This time around, you and your family are visiting some building because it houses an exhibit about an ancient Egyptian pharaoh mummy that supposedly features a curse because this is Goosebumps. While on the visit with your older brother and younger sister, you come across an ancient diary that reveals the mummy plans to walk again that night, and you have to decide whether to sneak further into the building immediately or return to your hotel and come back that night.
This is this book's major splitting off point, with each branch leading into two completely wildly different directions. But the selling point this time is just how varied the endings are. You have a whole bunch of really good zany endings, a whole bunch of actually proper scary bad endings, but even better, there are multiple good ways for the story to have been resolved, and even better than that, some kind of ambiguous ones.
Starting out, your choices basically lead you down one of two major paths, as per usual. If you head back to the hotel first, you'll spend your time in the US trying to deal with the mummy there, but if you try to explore straight away, you'll end up being dropped butt first into modern day Egypt. Personally, this is the first time that I couldn't pick which of the paths seemed like the obvious best choice. Whether you go to the Egypt or the US, there are so many kooky and weird places for it to take you. In one of the Egypt routes, you have to climb into the basement of a pyramid with an Egyptian guide who swiftly abandons you, only for you to end up back in the basement of that same building in the US. There's also an ending where you get offered to join a kid's secret agent program, but screw it up by accidentally drinking the drug lemonade to celebrate passing the test that you passed by not drinking the drug lemonade. Pure fucking genius. Now, if you go the other route, you end up with the possibility of the mummy taking over your life, or you can even become friends with the mummy and take him to a day spa in an effort to convince him that he doesn't need to steal your youth to get it back for himself. It's probably one of the silliest outros in the entire series, and frankly one of my favourites. That said, it's not like there aren't any bad points to this book. It's a lot fairer than some of the earlier books, but that does also mean it does a lot of telegraphing when a choice is the wrong one. Basically, if this book offers you a chance to back down from a choice, you should probably take it. All in all, it feels like Stein really started to get to grips with the gamebook format, but there's also still a few lazy choices. Page 67 in particular just feels really lazy. It forces you to flip a coin until you get tails, but it makes the use of the coin in the first place feel pointless. It's like they needed a few more pages, and he threw this in the way to bulk out the book. Any of my complaints about this book do feel like they pale in comparison when compared with its good points. In particular, I have to give R.L. Stein a bit of credit. At one point he tells you to hold your finger on the page when you're going to another page so you don't lose it. I have to imagine that he had seen a kid playing one of his game books and he knew how much we all cheated. 8 out of 10. The Give Yourself Goosebumps series remains an interesting choice for gamebook enthusiasts and an absolute must-have for anyone who's into Goosebumps. While it's a mixed bag of quality across the entire series, the sheer volume means that you are definitely going to find something that you will enjoy. Even better than that, these last 2 entries in the series show that there is a clear commitment to making genuinely good gamebook experiences. And I, for one, can't wait to see where the rest of the series goes. Assuming that I'm, alive, resurrected, whatever. Basically an excuse to let the channel go down.